Hello, Doctor Who fans across the world. Welcome to another Who Corner to Corner podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Paul, and I'm joined, as always, by my super duper good Whovian friend, Mr. Geoff. How are you, Geoff?
I'm very well, thanks. Good to be here again. Well, I'm always going to be
yes,
here.
Yes, it is. Yes. Again,
unless you sack me without telling me.
That would imply that I'm the boss, and I don't have that power, frankly.
Yeah, everyone knows it's me.
This is a purely mutual thing, 50-50.
75-25.
Yeah, okay, we won't discuss that in front of the viewers and listeners. Thank you very much. Right, okay, so we've got a very special podcast tonight. So we are going to look at certainly one of my favourite episodes from the Jodie Whittaker / Chris Chibnall era, which is the episode Can You Hear Me? Now, this story deals with quite a lot of things, and right at the top of that list is the issue of mental health, and this is quite a personal topic for a lot of people. I think most of us in our lives have been touched by this in some way, so we will attempt to be as sensitive as possible. But it's also a bit of an adventure, kind of scary, supernatural, thriller-style story as well. So we are going to talk about ghosts, demons, goblins, and immortal demons from the depths of the subconscious. Did you like that?
I did, yeah. I'll put a bit of echo on that just
there you
to
go. That's
amp it up a little bit.
So, okay, Geoff. So this story, as we said, is it's got a lot going on with it. I think narratively on the surface, it's literally about some kind of supernatural event that reveals itself as the story goes on. Now we start off in Aleppo, which is quite an unusual location in some respects. I don't think that Doctor Who has really visited the Middle East very much in its history. In fact, I can't really recall. Maybe the Crusades from the first Doctor's era. But since then, I think this is probably the first time we've been in that neck of the woods. Yeah,
I can't think of any other incidents, of going there. No.
Incidents, stories, tales, and all the rest of it. So anyway, we get this pre-credit sequence where we're in Aleppo, and we have someone who's literally running for her life.
Yeah, that's
she's
Tahira,
banging on the door of a hospital, one of the world's earliest hospitals dedicated towards mental health issues, and she's banging on this door. We hear footsteps, the ground shaking or something behind her, and she wants to be let in. So she's eventually let in with some reluctance by whoever's on the other side of it, and she thinks the thing that is chasing her is probably going to get inside if the people within the hospital don't do as she says. And they don't believe her. They don't. No. They're quite respectful of her demons, but they don't seem to believe that these things chasing Tahira, I think her name is, they don't seem to think that they're real. But of course, to Tahira, they're very real, and these demons do actually manifest themselves, because suddenly we see a massive claw enter from screen left and grab someone by the face. And the next time we visit this hospital, literally everybody has bought it apart from Tahira. And then we get the credits. Yeah. So that's quite it's quite a dramatic opening.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's another Who classic to just kind of go straight in on something that's not connected, to the Doctor or the main characters to set something up. Yeah, and like you said, it's quite it's quite sort of tense, this bit, a bit scary, in a strange location that will be quite new and mysterious to a lot of people, and then like you said, the three, I think it's three massive claws come round, don't they? And
literally big, long taloned, massive claw fingernaily things on the end of it. They look pretty fierce, and that's for sure.
I'll jump slightly ahead a little bit here, but I was going to say I won't spoil anything. But I'm assuming if people are listening, they've seen the episode. But that bit there was kind of scary enough, and then when you see the actual creature later, it's horrific.
It's pretty nasty,
it's like a skull type thing with a hairy body, and it looked in the
big
best
face,
way,
big mouth, big teeth, and
looks
big
horrible.
eyes, and
You know, it looked horrible, and you know, it did give me a bit of a jump when I saw it because it was so gross. So I quite like that, really. And I suppose just as I've been listening to you talk about the intro for the episode here, and obviously the themes within this one, it could be you could see the you know, the creature chasing her and things as, you know, like the old black dog, you know, that you know, scratching at the door, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But of course, it's been hooed and turned into a horrific monster. Maybe nobody else thinks that, but that's what
I hadn't thought of that, but you're absolutely right. I think that's a really good analogy.
You know, back then in you know, 1380. You know, I'm not an expert. I don't know a huge amount about it, but you know, in Aleppo, it was one of the world's first sort of hospitals for, you know, for mental health and the like, wasn't it? As the doctor says.
Indeed.
And I suppose you know, back then people would have had problems and issues like we do today, but they would have been so much less understood, and you know, nobody believes to hear her, and then again, that's a sort of, you know, representation of how things would have been probably perceived and taken back then as well, if you see what I mean.
I do see what you mean, but in a way what you're saying kind of implies that even now we have a widespread understanding of mental health issues, and I would argue that whilst on the whole most of us would like to think we do, I think there's still quite a lot of ignorance around in the world at large, and it takes a lot of commitment to try and understand these things at any reasonable depth. And I'm not even sure. My feeling is that the journey to understand mental health is an ongoing journey. I don't think it's ever going to be solved. At all. I think we get closer and closer to the truth of things, but it's almost like the closer we get to understanding, the more layers we kind of see. You know, that's my
no. I think you're right. I don't think at all that you know, everything is understood now and things are you know, solvable at all. I think we're probably further along the path of understanding than we were, you know, 500, 600, 700 years ago.
Totally agree.
And I think you're right, particularly as the world gets faster and scarier and, you know, busier, you know, new problems arise all the time, and so you know, things will continually develop and change, and you know, it'll be an area that's never it can't be, you know, resolved, you know, definitely.
I think you're absolutely right. So we're going to go more into this as we progress through the story, because I don't think there isn't any getting away from those themes within this, because they are so wrapped up in the narrative, in a kind of literal way, but also in a sort of metaphysical and more figurative way as well. So it's, you know, to me, that's actually one of the attractions of the story. The fact that, you know, it could just be a monster who done it, and is the monster real? Is the monster not real? You know, that's an interesting dynamic to have through the story. But the fact that question is kind of made relevant to, you know, to something which has been part of humanity since probably our since our creation. This is creation. I'm not a religious person, but you know, since humanity began, it's probably what I should say. But
you believe.
Moving on with the story then. So we get the credits titles. We learn that this story was co-written actually by one Charlene James, who's not a name I'd heard of before. So a little bit of investigative work has revealed that Charlene is a playwright and has written some very, very successful plays. And her debut play, which I believe was 2014, was called Cutting It, focused on two Somali teenage girls living in England who had binary perspectives on the practice of female genital mutilation, which is, you know, which has always been a topic worthy of discussion, and it's not an easy one to look at. And I wouldn't imagine, I haven't seen this play, but I wouldn't imagine it's an easy play to watch either. So, Charlene certainly has no fears when it comes to dealing with, some
big
spiky
subjects,
themes.
yeah.
Some spiky subjects, that's the word. But, the thing is, if we don't learn about these things through drama or through whatever, chances are most of us would never hear about them. Or, we might see something like this on the news, and then we forget about it as soon as whatever follows the news comes on. So the fact that we have these talented people writing this stuff enables us, it sort of opens our eyes and our ears and allows us to, have some kind of, even if just minimal insight into such things.
Well, that's one of the things with, well, anything, but I think sci-fi particularly is, to be metaphorical and to tackle things like this. And putting it kind of, underneath the surface image of, whatever's going on, and so in a way, I think tackling this in Doctor Who, like you said, I think it's a great episode, and it felt very fitting, within the Chibnall era, to sort of, go a bit deeper and, a bit more kind of, into the person, as it were, and thoughts, and do you know what I mean? And also, I just want to say that when I sat down to watch this one again a couple of weeks ago, I haven't watched this as much as any of the other 13th Doctor episodes, and that's not because I don't like it or because it's bad, but because actually I think it's quite a tough watch isn't the right one, but you've got to be in the right mood for it, do you know what I mean? Because it's quite a sort of, sensitive and emotional subject matter, and I sat down to watch it, and I was going to make notes like I do for every episode of Rewatch, and I fairly quickly put my phone away and didn't bother, and because I was so engrossed in it, and I said to Paul, I said, I'm going to have to watch it again, and I haven't managed to do that because of other stuff,
things, because of life,
but,
basically.
I was so into it that I didn't I didn't make any notes about it. I've remembered stuff, of course, but it really got me and drew me in.
Yeah, it does do that, doesn't it? I think because there is a really strong mystery and a really strong sense of unease right from the very start of it. So we have the Doctor drops the fan back off in Sheffield. Yeah. Which when was the last time they were in Sheffield, Geoff? We're in season 12, aren't we? Towards the end of it. So so they were in Sheffield in Spyfall, weren't they? So it's not like they'd been away since before then. So but it kind of feels like a sort of proper return, if you like, because the guys all kind of split up and go back to see Ryan goes to see his friend.
Well, actually,
Yaz goes back home.
They've been gone a while, haven't they? Because Thibaut says he hasn't seen Ryan for months, and Yaz has got to get back to see Sonia, her sister, isn't she? For a yearly sort of get together they have, which you don't know, and you don't know what it's for initially. So this is their first time back, isn't it, in a while, and a chance to kind of reconnect with friends. Graham goes and plays cards, and has his doctor check up and stuff. So there's a couple of quite interesting scenes of the Doctor here, aren't there? We should
there are.
Look at that one first, perhaps. So she leaves the fam, doesn't she? And this is when she thinks, I could just hop forward in time and come straight back, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. Just go forward to tomorrow lunchtime. She doesn't want to spend that time on her own. I think the way Jodie plays that is really smart, actually, because it's still, she plays it with an element of comedy humour, and it's like, well, they've all gone off, and there's me on my own now, and I'll what shall I do? She has this kind of I'd say it's an internal monologue. With most people, it would be internal, but of course, the Doctor, it's very external, very loud.
She's talking
monologue.
to the TARDIS as well, And,
exactly. Yeah, who am I going to impress now?
Yeah, that's it. Because then when she goes to Aleppo, she's still acting like they're there, and she says, "Oh,
that's right." It kind of carries on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the Doctor, in some ways, well, as we found out with the 10th Doctor, actually, the Doctor on her own is not always a good person to be around.
Yeah.
You know, either they're very dangerous or they're completely scatterbrained. But yes, so we do have that, and I think actually what this kind of shows out is very clearly the Doctor is a loner.
Yeah.
In the fam, you know, she's not human. She might, in some ways, aspires the wrong word, but maybe, you know, wants to share some of the positive human traits like compassion, for example. I think the Doctor aspires towards being compassionate, totally fails on more occasions than not to actually achieve it. But I think that's one of the key strengths of 13, is that she at least tries, attempts, and tries to understand, you know, how to be compassionate, and makes more of an effort than previous incarnations perhaps. And still gets it wrong.
But life's like that, isn't it? You know, you don't always get things right, and you pick yourself up and carry on. And I think these scenes of her here really kind of show the loneliness of the character, and particularly her, incarnation, and surrounded by the fam, to create that. That makeshift family, and she was, looking for that, from the outset. And I think as things progress, and we discover more about the timeless child, and all of that, the loneliness is more kind of apparent, and you can kind of understand that need for, even though it would have been probably subconscious at the time of not knowing everything, but that need for friends and family, and something to connect. Her Gallifrey's gone, doesn't know her true origins. So
well, that's it, isn't it? When you think about that particular journey, I know we're sort of straying off a little bit, but it is here. We get, the Doctor isn't human. She's not part of the human race. She might look like us, but she's not us. And, up until quite recently, we thought her home was Gallifrey, and she thought her home was Gallifrey. And, that was, at least she then had a people to whom she belonged, a civilization and a society. And even though the Doctor kind of ran away from that, decided it wasn't for them, wanted to go out and explore way back then, we now find out that actually that's not true either. So, this thing about who is the Doctor, well, from an internalized perspective, it's that, who am I? When when I have no family, when all my friends have gone, when I have literally no one other than the people I try and bring around me, when actually most of the people are actually trying to kill you or enslave you or torture you and stuff like that, how can you find a sense of belonging in all of that?
Well, and then
it's an incredible narrative throughout this part of the Doctor's history,
and it plays in more, with the beach bit in Legend of the Sea Devils. And they're just being there together in this time, and all those things. The Doctor will outlive Yaz and every companion, and the 10th Doctor said, something.
But it becomes about that moment then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So it's not about what may happen or what has happened. It's about where we are, where I am right now at this point in time. That's the bit that really matters.
Yeah. And also, again, sort of jumping ahead a bit, but the Doctor's kind of nightmare stuff here is some of the Timeless Child revelations, isn't it? Of being found by Tecteun and things. And because that's obviously, that part of it all is quite fresh information and playing on her mind. So the Doctor is investigating, isn't she, in Aleppo to try and find what the noise is, and she finds Tahira.
Well, there was the weirdy guy, what's his name, Zellin kind of appears in the TARDIS. He appears in the TARDIS,
isn't he? Yeah.
She feels it. She turns around and he sort of vanishes. Yeah. But he has that time to just give a little evil smile to the camera before he disappears in a cloud of nebulous, dusky, smoky, which is quite interesting, actually, because the TARDIS
nothing's
is
supposed to be able to get in it.
Well, not even the assembled hordes of Genghis Khan can break through those doors.
The Kasavin started, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah. But clearly, I think what's important there is that for anything that can break through the TARDIS,
the power
it's got to be pretty special.
Yeah, exactly. That power is off the chart.
So yeah, and the Doctor's quite pleased then, isn't she? Because she has something to do.
Yeah.
It's a place she can go to. She sort of tracks it. I can't quite remember how, but somehow it leads back to Syria, back to Aleppo, back specifically to that hospital.
Yeah. So we then go back to the fam, don't we? And
we do
kind of follow their individual journeys. Now, probably the one thing I'd say about this episode is often, like with a lot of episodes, it could have done with a little bit more runtime, just to be able to sort of explore things, in a little bit more detail. And that doesn't mean that what we've got at all is bad, but like Ryan's stuff with Tebow, it's all it's quite delicately handled. I thought, Tebow's been feeling quite down. He's missed his friend. There's obviously there's a lot going on, and I mean, it's more common now, but it's still not that often that you see guys talking to each other like that about problems like that. So I thought it was very nicely handled, and Ryan obviously felt bad and had remorse that he hadn't been there for him, and he hadn't seen all of this and hadn't been able to help Tebow. And so he's whilst he plays it kind of light-hearted, let's play FIFA or whatever it is, and I bought chips round.
Bought chips though.
He's there for him, and he crashes on the sofa, doesn't he? I think, and so he's when his friend needs him, even if it is I was going to say a bit late. It's not a bit late, but he's a man of action for it at that moment. And you see Tebow. Sorry to cut you off. To see Tebow then at the end, he's gone to a support group of some sort, and he's chatting with other guys, and it would have been nice to see a bit more of that and explore it. But I understand that it's a TV show. He's not a principal character, and he's had an arc within this episode. And do you know what I mean? I think that's it works, and it's enough.
I never really thought of it like that before, actually, because I've never thought that we've really lost anything from that little
I don't
story.
think so at all.
It doesn't feel to me like there's anything missing.
No,
I mean,
it
we
all
could
works.
sort of dwell on it a little bit more.
It would have just probably been nice to have more, really,
maybe
to see them together. But you're right. Nothing's missing, and it all works completely. And I understand.
It's quite an interesting relationship they've got, because clearly for Ryan, Tebow is his buddy, and it's his kind of home in a way. When you haven't seen your mate for a while, and it's like, well, Ryan can go off and have adventures with the Doctor and everything else, but actually home is home, and Tebow is part of that. And it's the kind of thing, when you're with your mates, there's almost like a routine, where you are a certain persona, right? It may not be really you, but it's still part of you. Maybe it's slightly exaggerated, maybe a bit more jokey, a bit more laddish or whatever, or maybe in some ways you're a little bit quieter. I don't know. It's whatever it is. And the way sort of Ryan kind of almost pushes his way into Tebow's apartment is in some respects kind of rude, and it shows in one respect, I think, how needy Ryan is for that sense of normality which Tebow represents, and which he thinks at that point can give him. So it's like he doesn't actually see, even though Tebow tells him at the door that it's not a good time, Ryan's like, I've got chips though, and almost pushes his way in, but he's almost like he's not acknowledging why he's friends with Tebow, why he needs to get in there and play FIFA and eat the chips and do all the rest of it. And I think as that story develops, Ryan comes to understand what exactly he's walked into. Not necessarily the consequences. That Tebow's state of mind isn't a direct consequence, I don't think, of Ryan's absence. But it's but it's partly because Ryan hasn't been there that he's kind of progressed. His conditions progressed as far as it has. And one of the great moments, I think, in that makes us realise Tebow is in trouble, is when he shuts the door behind Ryan and he goes at the locks with slightly more attention and detail than we would perhaps in our in our sort of everyday lives, but which could mean obviously he's trying to keep something out, which also it does actually mean he is trying to keep something out, because something has got into his nightmares. Something has crept its way insidiously into the dark places that he sees when his eyes are open, but also when his eyes are shut. And that in itself is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying. But it is, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Because this is now a story about nightmares. Again, Thibault tells Ryan that he's been having these weird dreams that are nightmarish.
Yeah.
And, I'm not going to cover it now, but we obviously get to see this. And this is how Zellin makes himself known within this story. It's through people's nightmares, by being a figure of nightmare, that weird shadow, the man standing at the bottom of your bed, the presence in your bedroom that raises the heckles on the back of your spine. All those things, all those primal fears, those subconscious nightmares, the terrors he has deliberately made himself into, and that's quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
And this is pre-Watershed, right? This is before 9 o'clock when it went out over here in the UK.
Yeah, it's a pretty dark theme and concept, isn't it? For
it really is.
And we discover later why he is stealing or manufacturing nightmares, don't we?
Indeed, we do.
We can talk more about him later. So we get to see a bit of Ryan's nightmare here as well, don't we?
We do, which is all about everything burning, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's Thibault burning because he wasn't there.
Yeah, I took it as
stop those flames from taking hold.
Because you see it drag briefly as well, and I took it to be a bit about coming from Orphan 55.
The world is burning.
I mean, this, I suppose it wasn't a particularly personal thing to Ryan, but it's an issue that is, affects everyone, of course, and having been through what they went through in Orphan 55 and the discovery there and everything like that, I can kind of see why that's weighing on him. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, our nightmares, they are personal, but they're unique to all of us. Some people are concerned more perhaps with the wider world, or some people feel more affected by the wider world than they do their personal circle, perhaps. If your personal circle is a comfortable place, then maybe it's what lies beyond it that is a source of fear to you, perhaps.
Yeah, and I suppose...
Or it could be what does the future hold? And again, because that Orphan 55 is a story about a very, very far future Earth. So what if, Ryan's fear is that no matter what I do, no matter what my friends do, no matter what we achieve in life, this is our ultimate fate for the planet to burn. That it's a very real thing.
Again, not saying it isn't. But also, from what you've just said there, I think he's been travelling with the Doctor for a while, which he is a subject he broaches later with Yaz, isn't it? And he's seen all sorts of different things and times and places, and that fear about missing out on things with his friends and his family, and what might happen to the world, and how long he can kind of be away from the everyday is obviously on his mind, isn't it?
Well, this is it, because obviously that comes towards the end of the episode, doesn't it, when he really starts to kind of question how long he can kind of do this. Because it's almost like, in some ways, being with the Doctor is you get the feeling that as a companion you would feel slightly suspended from your own reality, from your life, that you can just go away, have these adventures, blah, 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 and then because the TARDIS is a time machine, can drop you back exactly where you left off. But of course, these guys were all... Yeah, if it works. Yeah. But of course, these guys were all warned at the start of it by the Doctor. You won't come back the same person. There's no... You may not come back. You might not come back. You will not come back the same people that you left as. And that is brought back into this story. And I think, actually, just closing on that, this is the first time, I think, I actually felt that. I felt like the characters, because it kind of puts them right in front of you. They have changed. I felt these characters had changed. They had moved on. They had developed, in certain ways. And this is the story that really kind of kind of pulls it up,
Yeah.
because this is the last story before Villa Diodati
Yes.
and the end of the season.
Yeah.
So it's that, that kind of moment now in the whole sort of series, if you like, where everything's going to kick off after this.
Yeah, this is a really good episode for seeing how the fam have developed, and I'd say the focus is probably largely on Yaz in this one, and we actually see a huge amount of how she has grown and changed in the last couple of years, like pre-meeting her in the show and to where she is now, and then obviously in by Legend of the Sea Devils, she's changed again. So why don't we talk about Graham for a minute, because Graham's bit at this point is sort of fairly short, really, isn't it? It's, the Yaz section takes up more.
Yeah, good point. So I mean, so Graham, like you said, he's playing cards with his mate, and he starts seeing strange. He sees visions of this strange ethereal woman trapped in a place.
and she's saying, what does she say? Can you hear me? Help me, yeah.
Help me, get me out, or something like that. Yeah, and he's kind of weirded out by that, because then all his mates are like, "You all right, mate? You all right? What's going on?" So, yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, what's the matter with you? Nothing wrong with me, sunshine.
Yeah,
all that
he brushes it all off, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And then of course his nightmare, which actually we see a bit later on when they're in the ship, is about his cancer returning.
Yeah.
So that is a very, very real, very personal fear, and obviously quite a brave thing for Doctor Who, again, to tackle, to address, to kind of reference. Obviously it's been with Graham throughout the series, but it hasn't really been mentioned much since we first met Graham. It's kind of floated in and out, but it's never stayed around. It's never been an issue. It's never been something that the program has tackled head on until now. It becomes this is what we see inside him. This is his fear, and it's quite interesting that it's Grace. Obviously she was his nurse at the time, but now she's a figure of hate towards him. She takes a cruel delight in blaming him for forgetting about her or not saving her. Right? Why didn't you save me? And he's like, "Oh, I tried." And you kind of feel the pain, and I love it, because it is an expression of this sort of internalized guilt. When someone you love very, very dearly is no longer around, and you feel responsible for them. You feel, well, what if I'd done that? What if I'd done this? And you can't always express those feelings. You can't always find the right words to say. And if you did, do people actually hear them? Does anybody listen? Can they actually hear you? And it's such a hard thing. And he, so all their fears are kind of variations on that theme in ways that are very specific to them, and obviously this is very specific to Graham.
The sorry, that was really good, and I now don't know how to follow that.
Sorry, man.
No, but you're right, because it got me thinking there briefly. But obviously the final scene in the episode, a Graham scene, which we'll come to. But yes, that thing of people not hearing, and the episode being called "Can You Hear Me?" And I read on Twitter some time ago, people saying, "Oh, why does Zellin? Why do his fingers come off?" And and they go into the ears, and of course blocking the ears, so you can't hear.
Exactly.
And I thought, I didn't sort of twig that initially,
That's what we do, isn't it? We stick our fingers
exactly.
in our ears as children.
So all these people who are, in pain and want to talk and be heard, and want to help, he's blocking that, in these groups, he I guess he has to do it to two people so they can't hear each other. So one of them's got a nightmare that he's feeding on, and he's blocked their ears, so they can't hear the other person who he's doing it to. It's all it's a bit metaphorical as well, of course, but
it is, and it's also very literal in some ways as well, because the idea of this creepy guy in your bedroom with his fingers detaching and floating and flying towards you is the stuff of nightmares. It's kind of Freddy Krueger territory, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
maybe not quite as vicious and violent, as gory as that, but nonetheless, it all springs from the same well, I believe.
Yes, that's a very good parallel on it. Yeah, it's not so pointy. It's more fingertippy.
Fingertippy.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that the fingers, it's not the nail side, the tip of the finger that goes in. It sort of reverses and plucks in. So I'm trying to demonstrate this, actually.
Paul's wiggling his fingers.
I'm trying to detach my finger and pop it in my ear so I can show Geoff and our lovely listeners exactly what it is. But it's that multi-layered, highly textured narrative, isn't it, which works on lots of different levels. We've got the very literal sense, a nightmarish finger flying into your ear because it looks disgusting and it's weirdly scary and creepy, and you can't take your eyes off it, and it's gross.
Yeah.
But then obviously, yes, there's that there's that metaphorical sense of it as well, where it becomes sort of representative of people sticking their fingers in their ears and deafening themselves deliberately and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. So. Sorry, that sounded probably very disrespectful. Did I when I said blah blah blah? But you put it so well, Geoff. I can't.
No.
No. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
But
right?
that's what it is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So should we talk about Yaz in this episode, because there's really this is her her episode in many ways, and must just say it's great to see her sister Sonia, played by Bhavnisha Palmer, back in this episode.
Good friend Bhavnisha Palmer.
So if you haven't listened to our interview with Bav, you can go back through our podcast and find it. She's lovely, very very positive, great episode, great chat we had with her, and I'd forgotten actually how prominent she was in this episode. And it was great to see, even her character. She's been sacked from another job. She's at home waiting for Yaz to come back, and there's a lot going on there. You don't need to see off-screen stuff with Sonia, but just by knowing she's lost another job, it says quite a bit about the character and her life, I think.
I totally agree.
A sort of there's a dependency, between the sisters.
Yes, that's definitely,
Yaz, needed her, and Sonia needs her now, and they don't sort of necessarily articulate it, but they're obviously important to each other. I really hope we see Sonia again in the centenary, and there's a bit of a it'd be nice to see her being able to hold I was going to say hold down a boyfriend, but there was a comment about her not keeping a man, wasn't there? I think in an earlier episode, and for her to have a good job now, and not saying customer service isn't a good job, but her still being in it and having held it down, and finding her place in the world. So I hope we get to see that.
Yeah, I think that's it. Actually, her finding her place, and it's almost like at this point we think Yaz is almost there, isn't she? And I got the feeling from watching this that maybe Sonia needed this reunion more so than Yaz needed it, and yet Yaz did sort of need it.
Well, Yaz says we don't need to keep marking this anniversary event, but yeah, she they both do need it for different reasons, I think. So this one really kind of showed us Yaz pre the Doctor, didn't it? And there's been hints in other episodes about her being bullied and things at school as well, isn't there? And again, we don't need to. It's
kind of been seeded, hasn't it?
Yeah,
hasn't it? But we haven't known the details.
No, and we don't need to see it, and we don't need to hear it. In depth. You can kind of make your own interpretations about why and what and all that kind of thing, but we know that this has happened to her, and it obviously reached a point where she ran away, and what was she going to do? And that's her nightmare, isn't it? From that time.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, for everyone who's getting visited by Zellin here, it's 3:30 in the morning, isn't it? Yaz is asleep on the sofa.
Yeah,
she said she would end up.
She promised she wouldn't, and she did. Yeah,
but she did it nonetheless. And of course, she sees herself on the road across the moors. We don't quite know what's going on initially, and then gradually, by piece, it is almost like jigsaw puzzles kind of flying into sort of connect with each other, and we start to put this together. And I think we see Sonia, who's there as well as a kind of figure of accusation. I think, and then we see the policewoman who seems to reflect that accusatory kind of stare, and again, it's as a sort of internal reflection. It's like, when you think when you believe everybody in the world is against you, everybody hates you, everyone's staring at you, you've done something wrong, this is your fault. Sonia in the middle of the road, it's obviously not really Sonia, it's Yaz's.
Yes, it's her.
It's an internalisation from how she thinks Sonia thinks about her. But
that is her, Yaz's internal fears, because of the fact that Sonia has wanted to keep marking this anniversary, and has been waiting there that night for Yaz to turn up. She's 77 minutes late or something, isn't she?
Something like that.
You know that Sonia is there for her sister, and so the thing of you're useless and weak isn't her talking at all.
No, that's it. But it's
nightmare.
It's Yaz projecting
Yaz's,
isn't it?
And
of course, the policewoman isn't accusing her at all. Actually, we find out
she's actually
the policewoman is kind of helping her.
Yeah, she's very supportive, isn't she? She says, you might feel like this now, but things could change in the future, and she makes the deal with it, doesn't she?
I love that deal.
Yeah, so small and simple.
Done.
Yeah, 50p. And just that little bit. At the end when Yaz goes and knocks on the door, and the policewoman immediately knows it's her, and she's happy.
I blooming do remember you.
Yeah, happy to see her.
But do you know what? A few podcasts ago, because I was kind of listening to our back catalogue because I had nothing else to do. There was an episode where I kind of said to you, I don't often feel emotionally involved with pretty much any Doctor Who story.
Right.
And it's true. I very rarely do. I don't. I'm not one of these people who goes online and says, "Oh my gosh, I cried at this," because I generally don't.
Is that because I don't? You've got a heart of stone. Look,
well, you would think so, wasn't it? But different things touches in different ways.
I can tell you genuinely that I did not cry at Doomsday. I did not cry when Ryan and Graham left. I could go on.
You look so genuine. But what I'm going with this, it's very relevant, is actually one of the things that always does actually get a bit of a choke going in the throat, and this weird watery stuff starts to leak out of the corner of my eye when Yaz knocks on the policewoman's door and gives her, look, I'm feeling it now, even talking about it, right? And gives her the 50p. It's just, after everything that we've seen at this point and what we've come to understand about Yaz, it's so powerful to me anyway. I think that for me personally has much more emotional resonance than the thing we were talking about, which was the Doctor and Rose on the beach. Yeah. For me, and I'm not saying that's not an emotional moment. That's the one where I said to you before, I don't get it, Geoff. I didn't feel anything with that.
This bit with
Stone.
No, but things.
But this one, this. But hold on. But this, it kind of illustrates for me the reason I think why I really engage with this particular era. Is because those companion stories, their characters, their humanity, their very souls, as I've always said before, both on this podcast, on my Twitter and everything else, to me they feel more human and because of that more relatable. I'm not necessarily saying it makes them better or worse than any others. It's just who they are and how they've been portrayed. For me, I engage with that more than all of the sci-fi nonsense. I love sci-fi nonsense. You can see it from the collection behind me. But to bring a reality to it, a truth to it that connects at a very human level, to me, gives the sci-fi nonsense much more weight in its own right and makes me engage with it far, far more. and feels more genuine than if it was literally just the shallow story of the nightmare monster, which would be great in its own right. But because it's got this other stuff, and I feel that kick of emotion when Yaz hands over the 50p, it just feels real to me, Geoff.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said this before, probably on the podcast as well. But I think if you don't care about the characters in something, or have a connection to them, it doesn't really matter what's blowing up or how big the spaceships are, or the robots or whatever. Yeah, lovely. I love all that. But if I don't care about the people, it doesn't really mean anything. Kind of, long term. I wouldn't go back to that stuff. And I think you're right. The characters in this era they're normal people with problems that are relatable and are real and human, and they're not all the most important person in the universe or any of that stuff. And I think there'd been a lot of that in recent years of the show, and that's not a bad thing at all. But this change is different and fresh, and I think that's why it's connected with people, with some people so well, and that when Yaz walks into the policewoman's house there, I wonder what, I want to know, what the conversation was and what happened, and I'd like to see more of them, in a Big Finish audio at some point. Just every so often Yaz goes back and sees her, and they catch up on each other's lives, and that bond develops between them. With Yaz running away and things, what was your interpretation of what she was going to do there? Because I thought that it was quite a sort of bleak point there for her, and they say she was running away, but I'm not sure that was a truthful. So how did you take it? How did you read it?
For me, it seemed pretty clear that she was there to kill herself.
Yeah,
I think there's a definite kind of suicide thought there, without it explicitly being so. Like you said, it's open to interpretation. The story doesn't tell you definitively one thing or another, except that she's running away. So it could just be, well, I'm running away from home, I'm running away from the bullies, from whatever it is, from the source of my pain. But maybe the source of her pain is her life, as she feels at that point. And that is really dark. And actually looking at Charlene James's CV, those are the subjects she tackles. I wouldn't be surprised if that was in her mind, perhaps, as a possible, when she was writing this.
I think so. That was how I kind of read it. And kudos again to Chibnall for he's had a few playwrights on the show, and has obviously selected people based on the strength of their work, and then the topics and themes that's dealt with, that they can bring to an episode, such as Ella Road, with her strength with writing kind of queer relationships that was brought into Legend of the Sea Devils, and
that's it. He's kind of bringing in those people who can write these subjects, who can deal with these topics with intelligence, maturity, and the real skill, keep them within the framework of fantasy and science fiction, and beyond that, another level, Doctor Who, which is its own brand of science fantasy weirdness, isn't it? To get all those ingredients working in a sort of 50-minute piece of TV is quite exceptional. So so we're kind of at the point which I think is the soul of this particular episode, which is Yaz, really. We get Ryan's kind of fear of everything burning, we see Graham's fear of his cancer returning, and we see Yaz's fear as something that actually did happen to her. It's not a future thing. It's not a fear of what might happen.
Yeah, fear of going back there.
It's a fear of what did happen, and the emotional churn that is still very present within her personality. It's always there. And when I sort of look at this now, you think back to Spyfall, when she gets sucked out and planted in that weird extra-dimensional forest. When she returns to Earth, she's crying.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't really know why that is. We think, okay, so she was terrified of being in that place and alone, and, no sign that the Doctor was going to rescue her particularly, despite the general hope that she might do. But what if within that place, she kind of went back to the state of mind she was in on the moors that time? What if, because these things, they never really leave us. They're never that far away from whatever we surround ourselves with in the future, and whatever we think, whatever becomes our kind of normality and our comforts and our framework. These terrors that we visited earlier in our life, they're never that far away. And you kind of think, what would it take for me to go back to that place? A tiny push, a big shove. Sometimes, it's different in each case, but it could be a very tiny shove.
Yeah.
Actually, in Yaz's case, if that was the reason for her crying at that point, then being shunted from one dimension to another, one universe to another, is actually quite a big shove.
Yeah.
It's again, to have these sort of allegories sort of working their way out through Doctor Who science fantasy is it's intelligent stuff, and I think it's handled very, very sensitively,
I
very
think
maturely.
So, yeah. So we end up on the space station, don't we?
We do.
Lovely.
I mean, we haven't mentioned that the Doctor's come back, because in our podcast she's still in Aleppo at this point.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
But she has come back. She comes back with Tahira, doesn't she?
She
She has a little adventure there where she doesn't, she's wandering around with her Sonic trying to figure out where this monster is that Tahira's sort of telling her about, and she can't, there's nothing sort of registering, and yet there's a little hair. Oh no, that's right. No, tell a lie. But first, she actually sees the thing, doesn't she?
Yeah,
she finds
the
Tahira,
Chagaska,
and she's like, "Come on!" And she's like, "I can't because it's up there." And she looks up, and this thing is stepped to the ceiling, right?
Yeah.
It's like rah, and it's everything you described. And then they run. It sort of runs after him. There's a feeling in the camera movements. when it hits its footsteps hit the ground, everything really shakes.
Yeah.
They have some really good camera shake technology going on there. Literally, some guy sort of shaking a camera,
probably,
post or whatever it is. But it's brilliant, because we sort of go from that sort of weird kind of excitement, the sort of visceral Doctor Who-ness of Doctor Who, back and forth from that to the to the kind of the more subtextual stuff, the deeper narratives. And it's whenever I see these things being pulled off in TV drama, I'm astonished by it, because it is such a skill to do this, and for it to seem so easy, for us to be carried along by the excitement of the monster and the kind of mystery element of the weird guy with the fingers in the room, and also the deeper history exploration of our characters' fears.
So much more going on underneath.
It's really something, and we're probably just after halfway through the episode at that point when the Doctor returns, aren't we? So she's had this thing going on, and she's like, "Meet my new friend. This is Tahira."
Yeah.
And she's from Aleppo, and the guys being the guys, they just sort of take her on board. Yeah. It's fine.
Yeah.
She has a little induction to the TARDIS way. Yeah, she always like this. Yeah, pretty much. So it's like they just, and that's what I love about these guys. There's no sort of there's no sort of jealousies. There's no sort of, who is this weird person from 1380? It's like, just welcome to the fam.
Yeah.
You're one of us now. You're the TARDIS. You're the fam. You're the crew. Okay, so they're brought to the space station in the future, or whatever it was, right? And we get we uncover pretty quickly what this thing is. So Graham thinks the woman is trapped, and kind of impresses on the Doctor to set her free. They find that she's in this sort of prison type thing between two planets colliding. So we get a nice bit of SFX. We get
bit of incursion.
Yes, a bit of that, which is all nice, and it looks great. Nice to see some really good special effects going on in this, and of course she lets her out. Zellin's there as well. I think he traps the guys in their nightmares. That's when we start to see the deeper layers, isn't it, about the sort of Yaz and everything we've been talking about.
And we discover a bit more about them, don't we? So they're Eternals and gods essentially of some type.
Well, yes, exactly. Yeah, that's it. It's there's that speech that Zellin does, isn't it? When the Doctor's trying to work out how to let this thing go, and he name checks. Hold on, because I wrote
is it a toy maker?
I wrote this down. Wait. That's it. There you go. So he's an immortal. Yes, he likes games. He sees this dimension as a beautiful board.
Yeah.
And he name checks the Eternals, the Guardians, and then he says the Toymaker would approve, which just sent me into absolute fan hysteria at that point, because the Immortals in various forms have dogged the Doctor since the Celestial Toymaker, since the first Doctor. So they've always been there. So I love that, and this is where he makes it clear that he chose this form, and his behaviour is literally purely to strike fear. That's what he does, and as we find out, the reason he does that is because the woman who's trapped isn't actually trapped. Well, she is. She's been imprisoned
by someone else.
Actually, she's in prison for a reason, because she is a terrifying force, and he's been feeding her with the nightmares that he's gathered from his terrible visage. Because why? Because it's fun.
Yeah,
it's a game.
They had a game,
the
didn't
boredom
they?
of eternity.
They picked two planets.
Some people will race yachts to enlightenment. Others will have this power struggle between light and dark. Some will clown around with various board games and trilogics and what have you. But no, Zellin and his chum want to literally strike fear, suck out the energy from that, and just get loads of people killed in the process.
They picked two planets, didn't they? Which you sort of learn about in a really nice animation. Pick the two planets to manipulate the people and the inhabitants and
into killing
put them at war, and then eventually they turned on them and trapped her Rakia between them, and kind of pushing the planets into one another with her little tiny cell, preventing the collision. So Zellin has sort of tricked the Doctor, really, isn't he? And gets her out, and then you get that really kind of Harry Potter, Dementor, Voldemort type image of her in that darkened street with her arms out and all the streaks of smoke going into her.
I love it. Yeah, the imagery is super cool.
Yeah.
Both of these guys just look fabulous.
Yeah, I love all the sort of tattoos on his head.
Tattoos on heads and all of that. I think what's great actually, which is the kind of underplayed nonsense of it, that they do all this in a Sheffield street, or an ordinary street, and you kind of think, a lot of sci-fi dramas would probably up the ante a little bit. They'd have them striding through between the skyscraper canyons of New York, pulling everything down behind them as people scream and get involved in their own nightmares. But no, not over here, chums. We walk down a street in Sheffield, and
we can't afford to do
it's
that.
In the middle of the night. But it's great. But you know what? The thing is, again, for me, this sort of brings it home a bit more.
Yeah.
And okay, it may not be as epic, capital letters, as some of the other stuff, but it makes it real. It's like it could happen in your street.
Exactly.
You look outside, you pull the curtains at 2:00 in the morning. There's two figures out there. You can't quite figure out who they are.
Yeah.
It could be these guys pulling your nightmares.
It could be. Yeah.
Love that idea. It's like waking up. Was it John Pertwee or Patrick Troughton who said, "There's nothing more scary than finding a Yeti on your loo," something like that. It's that, but taken a few degrees further on. I think.
Yeah.
Mind you, Yeti are pretty scary. They're pretty fierce looking. I always thought so. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes. Moving on. Right. So. We get that, and then the Doctor does manage to trick them, doesn't she?
Yeah, they end up back in Aleppo, and the Doctor tells Zellin, I'm just reading here, he was wrong about humans creating their own weaknesses and that they are stronger for living through it every day. And that kind of plays back into Yaz's fears from earlier, and dream Sonia telling her she's weak and useless and things. And then we found out that the Chagaska are... they don't attack Tahira because they're a sort of physical manifestation of her, her fears and her mental.
They are literally her inner demons, aren't they?
Exactly. Yeah, that the black dog type of symbolism that I mentioned earlier. So she summons one of them, doesn't she? She can control it because she's overcome her fear, and then the Doctor sort of puts Zellin's fingers back on them. Doesn't she?
That's right.
Yeah. And then they get stuck back in the prison between the two planets to live with
both
nightmares.
Of them this time.
Yeah. So they wanted to be together. Now they get that, but with eternal torment.
With all the pain. Yeah, that goes with it. And sure, they'll break their way out at some point.
At some point.
Because they're immortals, and they'll come hunting the Doctor down, as immortals tend to do. They never quite go away.
No. So when that's all wrapped up, we come to the scene in the TARDIS at the end with Graham and the Doctor. I'm sure everyone knows this scene. So Graham opens up and confides in the Doctor, what his nightmare was and his worry about his cancer returning. And the Doctor says that she's socially awkward and doesn't really quite know what to say, and that she'll have an answer in a moment for him. And she says, I'm just going to go over here and pull some levers and stuff. When I first watched it, I thought she was, and I still do, sort of diffusing the emotional intensity of the situation by making not making light of it, but making light with a little joke and things. And obviously I've seen this is the worst episode ever, and all the quote unquote discourse about it. But then I've also seen people saying, I wouldn't know what to say. And like you said earlier, sometimes you can't say anything because do people hear you? Can you say the right thing? Or it's very difficult, isn't it? So what's your take on that scene? I'm not outraged by it at all.
No, I'm not outraged by it. I think there's an honesty to this scene which is rarely seen in TV. To be honest, I mean, this is. When the whole furor of this part of the story kind of exploded literally within seconds after the episode had aired, I like to think of myself as quite a thick-hided person. I've got a reasonably thick skin. Twitter and social media can be a bit of a hellhole. There's no two ways about it. But this was probably the only time when I just had to. I thought the only way I can kind of cope with this is to walk away from it and not go on social media for a few days, because the discourse was making me feel so angry. It was unreal,
really,
and it was it was actually affecting my mental health. I think,
which is ironic, isn't it?
It was just we had. I mean, I'm sure within there was some reasonable criticism, but I certainly didn't see it. All I saw was a lot of very angry men kicking off about something they just wanted to kick off about because they just don't like this era of the story, and somehow felt that they were somehow had a right to be experts in something. So it was a scene of extreme honesty. I could relate to it, and it's interesting actually, because I mean I have watched this story quite a few times, and every time that scene comes up, I kind of feel slightly differently towards it. Always very positively towards it. I've never watched it and thought, oh, if only the Doctor had said something. Well, actually, I do think, well, if only the Doctor had said something else,
and actually,
but only in the sort of way that I wish I'd said something else. When I've had similar conversations, with people, and afterwards you think, if I'd have said that, the right thing occurs to you after the fact. Certainly from my experience, I've been in that situation quite a few times when, it's a difficult one, because I mean when I watched it this last time a couple of nights ago, I actually thought it was quite funny.
But I thought, I initially did as well.
You said it diffuses the situation, right? And it really did, and it just highlights how far away the Doctor is from actually achieving this aspiration of compassion. The 10th Doctor certainly didn't have it. The 4th Doctor didn't have it. The 5th Doctor spent most of his time angry with his companions, and and the 6th Doctor wanted to kill his companions. The 7th Doctor manipulated his companions, and so on and so on and so on. The Doctor may well have aspired towards being somewhat more human or compassionate or whatever, but it's so far away from it that, as illustrated in this scene, she can't find the right words. She doesn't know how to express. She doesn't know how to empathise with Graham. Her face is so void of empathy.
But that's not a mark of cruelty from the Doctor.
No,
absolutely. It's a lack of understanding.
Because
again, obviously it came later, but with the Legend of the Sea Devil stuff, they want to live in this moment, and the Doctor will outlive everyone. The Doctor has no worry about anything, like an illness, because that's not going to affect her. And also, talking about the scene now, and what we've talked about tonight, the Doctor is socially awkward, and the Doctor is keeping all of the stuff about the Timeless Child bottled up inside herself.
Exactly. And she's dealing with her own upsets.
And Yaz is
stress.
Again, perhaps a bit later from here, but Yaz is desperate for her to tell her and to open up, and she says, I will do. I promise you, we'll have the beach, and we'll go to the beach, and it's not retroactively making this scene, correct, quote unquote, right, because I don't think there's anything wrong with it in the first place. But I think that, as we watch all of this stuff back, and as we've talked about with other people on Twitter, there's more planning to things I think people might see, because it's quite subtle stuff. And
it is. As we said before,
it shouldn't be subtle. Well, do you know what? It is, and that's the way it works.
It absolutely can be subtle.
Yeah.
This is how we've said it before. This is how contemporary thrillers work. It's how most characters' motivations and sort of reasons for their behaviour are layered throughout an ongoing narrative. Broadchurch, 6 episodes. Actually, it was 3 seasons of 6 episodes, so it's 18 series altogether, and they're all, there are narrative threads that go throughout all 3 series of Broadchurch.
Yeah,
and they're sort of revealed piece by piece.
Things don't need to be paid off,
little stuff,
immediately.
No, absolutely. This is what typifies Chris Chibnall's era of Doctor Who, is this kind of very careful, very steady planning. Now, within these things happen to the plan. Things that you lay up might not quite work out the way you do. These things, they evolve even despite the planning. But I have no doubt in my mind that there's a structure in place that overarches all of this, and that to a greater extent, most of that structure is intact and was realised, throughout the whole 3 series of Jodie's Doctor. But going back to this scene, I don't see it as it's not offensive to me at all, and if it is to other people, then it's fair enough if that's how you feel about it. But for me, it is a very truthful thing, and it kind of it is so difficult to know what to say to people when they're going through pain, and I've had it when. I'm not a very good person at sort of expressing my feelings. Like you said to me earlier, Geoff, I'm stone-hearted.
I was joking.
But no, I do. I genuinely, and it's been with me all my life. I generally have always had a problem with empathy. I think right from when I was very small, and I've never ever known what to say, even as an adult. I think I say that only recently, in the last couple of years or so, have I really kind of got it into my head how to behave when people tell me bad news. When someone dear to them has got terminally ill, or has passed away, or whatever. And it always struck me from an early age that when people say, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that," I always used to think it didn't sound genuine. In my head, in my little head, it never did. And as I sort of grew older, I really struggled with finding the words, or not so much the words, because you kind of know what to say possibly. It's I'm sorry and all the rest of it, but it's the how do you say it.
Yeah.
And I think this, I know from experience, this is an issue that a lot of people share. It's not that you don't feel sympathy for them. It's just that the empathy perhaps is slightly disconnected in some way, and you don't feel like it's for me personally, it's like I don't truly have the right to understand your pain. I can't possibly put myself in your shoes, so how can I possibly empathize with what you're going through? It's really tough, and it's only, like I said, in the last couple of years, it's not always about understanding or trying to feel as they feel, which is what empathy is. It's about the title of this episode. It's about listening properly, absolutely, truly 100% listening to someone as they express this to you. The Doctor fails at this, but she does so in an honest way, as so many of us do.
Yeah, I think
but
you're right. When you get presented with news like that, bad news or someone opening up, you don't always know what to say, and it can be difficult and a bit awkward because obviously somebody wants to talk, but like for me, I suppose my worry is, well, I'm not qualified to say anything here, and anything I do say is going to feel, inconsequential, and I would want to, help and to, resolve the situation, and make things better, but I don't know if I can. It's very difficult.
Yeah, that's it. And you can't always, can you? And when people say, "Well, if there's anything I can do," well, they might mean it. They might not mean it in some ways.
But maybe
I always used to get the impression that people would say these things just to kind of, in a way, keep themselves at a distance. I realise that's not really true at all. But that's what I used to think until. Quite a recent age. Yeah,
people say, "Oh, yeah, if I can help," and there's always that thought. Well, they probably don't mean it, and I suppose that's a whole other thing. Is if the situation arose, who would actually be there for you? But again, going back to the title, "Can you hear me?" Graham just wanted to talk, and maybe sometimes that's enough. And just to get a response from someone, is to know they've heard you and that they're there for you.
Yeah.
So look, I'd like to go to some comments from people about the episode. We thought earlier that we didn't have any, but actually
we got quite a few
treasure trove. Yeah. So I'll just go through. There's
about,
Geoff,
what we got?
30 on here, so I'll just go through some of them. But I'll start with one from Melvin Pina here, who's at Kittenry. He says, Nina Chakrabarty's illustrated animated segment is one of the wildest and most inventive visuals of the entire Chibnall era, which is saying something. I love that part, especially.
We didn't really talk about that, did we? But it's a fabulous piece of storytelling.
Thanks, Melvin, for name-checking the artist there. Mike Honor, who's at Mike Honor, says, it's such a big concept that I think it could have been a two-parter because some parts felt rushed. I really like the animation in the middle telling the story of the warring planets. Overall, it's a hit for me, with each of the companions having interesting character moments. So that kind of, goes back to what I said a bit earlier. Could have done with a few more minutes maybe, but it all works.
Possibly. I personally didn't feel that, but I can.
I suppose it's just because I wanted more, but that's that's all. Then we've got Philip Marsh here at Philip MO. M0421717, one of my favourite Whittaker episodes thanks to its visual style and nightmarish imagery, but the scene between the Doctor and Graham is awful. So Philip, if you're listening, I'd like to know why you felt it was awful, and now we've talked about it, I wonder if that might lead to a rewatch and a reappraisal. But I'd be interested to find out why he didn't like it, why it didn't work for him. Annie, who's at Annie's Musings On, says, I absolutely love it. I love the way this episode approaches mental health and is also an intriguing sci-fi story. I actually love the Doctor in this and Yaz so much. Woman in a TARDIS, who's at Jodie's TARDIS 13, says, I love this episode because I felt represented by Yaz's mental health struggles and the Doctor's absolute awkwardness when talking to Graham. I could see myself in both characters and instances. So I've got a bit of a theme now on these next couple of tweets. So the Robot of Death, who's at Graham Ward 68, says the fact the awkward conversation appears in an episode called Can You Hear Me struck a chord with me. It's very personal how it relates to me, but touching on this human frailty in a family show was something I appreciated. And then Matt Price, who's at Matt_the Whovian, says, I don't think it's a bad episode. As someone with social awkwardness and likely neurodiverse traits, I had zero issues with the scene between 13 and Graham. I'd have struggled to find the words just as 13 did. Head Desk, who's at Miss Head Desk, says it's an excellent story with an important message about mental health. Yaz's story hits so close to home, and the moment she goes to visit Anita, showing how far she has come, never fails to move me to tears. And then she also says that when Graham talks to the Doctor, she's never seen a more precise representation of her on screen. This one's quite interesting. Catherine Komar, who's at Sailor0079, says, good ep. My only gripe is I wish they had done a different scene with the Doctor's nightmare. because there was so much potential there from everything she'd been through in her life. So that's quite interesting.
It is, yeah. It's quite blatantly used to sort of further the timeless child and just kind of remind us of it before we get to the end of the series.
Yeah,
when it all kicks off a further thing. But
yeah.
I think with the Doctor's character, there's license for that within the fiction. I think there's it's a really good observation, by the way. I'm not putting the tweet down at all, but I think that there are times with something like this when you can just let the fiction do what it wants. Keep the characters real, the human characters. The Doctor, that's the variable. She's the variable that you can kind of mess around with a little bit.
So I've got another one here from Caitlin, who's at Trashy TARDIS, and they say, honestly, one of my favourite episodes. Yaz's story really hit home for me specifically, and I love Aleppo and its history so much. Now, this one is very interesting. So this is from at Mocha Quokka. I really love this episode, except the final scene with Graham. I'm a cancer survivor, and I live with the same fear of it coming back every day. So it was really upsetting to basically be told, you don't matter, for the sake of an attempt at humour about the Doctor's social awkwardness. Also upsetting were the people defending this scene. I'm really socially awkward, and yet I'd never treat a friend with cancer in that way. I try my best to find something to say. So, like I said earlier, I can see why some people could feel upset and be offended by it, and I suppose with a scene like that and a topic like that, there is almost no 100% correct way to do it. There's always going to be something that will trip it up, but to Mocha there, I appreciate you sharing that with us, and I hope you can understand where we've come from on it, and that we we're defending it, and it hasn't gone down badly with you.
I think it's it's one of those things where the truth of it comes from your own experience, and how you relate to it. Is all down to that experience and how you've been affected by such news, and these things have touched all of us in many different ways. I mean, as you well know, Geoff, and maybe our readers, listeners won't know so much. My eldest daughter was diagnosed with a cancer, really rare cancer, when she was a baby, and it was very difficult when we used to sort of take her out of the hospital. She had this tube on her nose. It was all plastered to the side of her face, and she had no hair because she was going through chemotherapy at like sort of 1 year old, and it was difficult when we sort of. She was at Bristol Hospital, and we'd sort of take her out in a little buggy and sort of go places and try and be as normal as possible. And quite often, I can recall lots of times when people come up and say, is she all right? And what's wrong with her and stuff like that. And whilst on the one hand, I appreciate the kind of, the empathy and everything else, on the other hand, I kind of just wanted to smack them in the face a bit, because, it was almost like, I can't think, it just, and again, it is purely down to my issues maybe, and this is another sort of failing that I have with with lacking of empathy. It's I couldn't understand how they could possibly be genuine with what they were saying, because to me it didn't sound genuine. It sounded like somebody putting on an act to try and sound genuine. The tone of voice always sounded the same. The words used never came across as anything other than platitudes to me anyway. And that could well be, my sort of, this sort of lack of empathy I had, or this misunderstanding of it. But also as well, the sort of frame of mind that I was in at the time, where, our whole world as a family being kind of thrown upside down by this. And, it was tough to get through, and but it's never that far away. So for me, when I see something like this treated as honestly, or with the doctor kind of responding in the way she did, yes, there's no easy answer, but I think the worst thing that could have happened at that point would be for the Doctor to give Graham a magic pill that cured the cancer, because I think if they had done, I'm so glad they didn't do that. Regardless of what our feelings, whether we like this bit of the story, we don't. I think if she'd have gone down that road, if that was what had been written, that would have undermined everything that this story set out to achieve.
It would have undone and undermined all of Graham's stuff, and then also it just
everything.
Everything. It removes any element of danger and emotion in the show ever again, because
there's no doubt that Gallifreyan technology or whatever that can probably cure cancer and probably cured it a long time ago. And I did see this criticism as well. Why didn't the Doctor do that? She could have done it, and I think that would have been the worst thing ever. This, at least, whether it speaks to you negatively or positively, is at least very genuine. And we can hate the Doctor for saying what she did, because it wasn't right. Graham poured out his soul to that, and she just kind of, she didn't shrug it off as such. She did, but she didn't. She kind of said, well, look, I can't deal with this, I'm socially awkward. She did make a joke of it, but she made a joke of herself, not Graham. Not him, I think she made she sort of externalised who she is and where she was, and the fact that she's so detached. But in a way, I think also to kind of protect herself from having to deal with it, because how can she really?
She's always. The character's always feared, the loss of companions, and the thought that it will happen again is, not one that the Doctor particularly wants to, entertain. So just would like to do a couple more tweets here. So this is from at Felix Fraser. It's a very thought-provoking episode, chilling in parts. It's great to finally peek behind the curtain of the lives of our regulars and get some depth. Zellin is a fab antagonist, and it's shot very well too. As for the controversy of the end scene, well, there's more to say on that than I can possibly fit or explain in a tweet or 10. Suffice to say, it adds to the episode for me rather than detracts, and again makes it a richer viewing experience. Remember, not everything worth watching will be easy or comfortable.
Yeah, that's quite right, actually.
That's an interesting point. Camille Mackenzie, who's at Cowbear Creates, says, I love the concept. It looked gorgeous. Creepy finger guy. Mental health issues are a powerful topic, and each person will react to it differently based on their own experiences. Great insight to Yaz's past, but my God, that female villain was phoning it in. Really let the ep down.
No! I can't disagree more. I thought she was fabulous. Brilliant.
So we've got Matthew, who's at Disciple of Brad here. One of the many reasons why Series 12 is so good, each of the companions given room to shine in their own ways. Brian's connection to Orphan 55 ventures into the impacts of adventures that Doctor Who doesn't normally get to explore, and Zellin is a brilliantly creepy foe. Then here's a good one. Marcus Cotton, who's at Sir Jedi Sentinel, says, probably my favourite episode of the Whittaker era. It's nice to see the Doctor face a proper godlike foe, which hasn't really happened in New Who, because New Who likes to deify the Doctor. And it also has
that's a good point.
And it also has the most relatable and overhated ending in all of Who. And then our friend Gail writes at Mealy Garage, says, I don't think I've seen it since broadcast, but I quite remember liking it, including the frog bit. It is the one with the frog, isn't it?
That's it. Takes you away, Gail.
No, Gail.
Don't worry, we won't tell anybody.
And a special shout out to at Matt Perg, who posted a couple of photos on this post of him when he was an extra in the Aleppo scenes, which was quite exciting.
Okay.
And then there was a good one here from Salty Space Squirrel. I wouldn't want to watch it in an empty house. Taps into my fear of a creepy, malign presence watching me in my sleep. The episode is spooky as hell, but also emotionally touching and brave, tackling the taboo of mental illness, especially Ryan helping his depressed mate. That's quite an interesting mix there, and I've genuinely read out the positives and negative comments there, and I think what I would take away from that is some people really liked it all, some people really liked it but didn't like the ending, some people hated it, some people hated the ending, but the ending is I would venture it's down to individual and personal take on things, and there is no right or wrong viewing on it, but I think I could safely say that there was no intention to offend or insult with it. That's what I would say anyway.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, obviously we're all coming to this from the outside as viewers, so we're all going to experience this. We weren't all involved in the creation of the story at all, but I mean, when you look at the provenance of this story, we've got Chris Chibnall, who's the kind of overarching story writer. We've got Charlene James, who has written a lot around these subjects, and has won various accolades and awards for her work. And I do believe also the scripts was passed to the charity Mind. I believe.
Yes,
I don't know.
There is something at the end of it of the BBC action
they
line,
sort of
isn't there?
Acknowledge their sort of, I don't know if it's contribution or something, was it? But it's they acknowledged some input from them to some degree. I'll be honest. I don't know how that sort of looks, or how that happened, but I kind of assume from that they had a go at the script to point out anything which perhaps wasn't truthful or would be, perhaps hurtful, harmful, or would trigger certain people. But and it's and clearly they didn't find anything. But that's not to say that there isn't something in there that's gonna, that is gonna resonate badly with somebody, perhaps. Again, it's all personal experience, and I think it's a danger to some degree of a subject like this in a sort of mainstream sci-fi show. And yet, on the other hand, if our favourite show didn't tackle subjects like this, if it wasn't brave enough or intelligent enough to do these things, then perhaps a lot of us wouldn't confront them, in a certain way. It's nice. I've quite enjoyed our chat, because it's actually been quite nice to sort of externalise my thoughts about it and how it relates to sort of my inner psychoses and weirdnesses and my experience. And I'm quite glad to have that, and hopefully people have been listening to it.
Yeah, it's just quite a long one now.
Straight
hopefully
away,
because
they might have done. What I mean?
Yeah.
But it's fun, and I think also that just to kind of close this off, what I've felt at the end of this is that at this moment the fam have really bonded.
Yeah.
They've all through sort of undergoing their own sort of personal journeys into the darkest parts of their psyches, sort of come out the other side in a way that's brought them closer together. And I think this is the closest they're ever going to be before it all kicks off in the next 3 episodes. So it's a wonderful, for me, it's a wonderful story. I think there's a truth to it, there's an intelligence and a maturity to its subject matter, and it handles all of that within the framework of Doctor Who, and it does so incredibly well, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed rewatching this episode and rediscovering it, and also really enjoyed talking about it tonight and rereading people's thoughts on it. It's
thanks for sharing those.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Like I said earlier, it's the one episode I haven't watched as much as others, purely because, like I said, you've got to be in the kind of right frame of mind for it, because it's quite a dark episode in a lot of ways. But rewatching it, I thought, I like this one a lot, and it's got a lot to say, and I'm grateful that the show tackled something like this and opened up these things, and that Yaz had the storyline that she did, but all of them, I think it's a great episode, and I think that maybe people will come to rediscover it in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. So no, it's been good. Been a good chat. Almost like a soul-searching chat. Yes. This one. So
so you'll send me the invoice for the £100 for your time.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Don't worry. Honestly, what's he like? He's always after my money. This guy. Do you know what I mean? Ah, dear listeners, thank you so much for
everyone.
joining us on this episode, and to those of you who contribute to our Twitter threads, thank you again. Join us for our next episode, which is going going to be... Actually, I don't know what our next one's going to be. Actually, Geoff, thinking about it.
That,
but it's going to be a lot of fun, that's for sure. So thanks again, listeners, and we shall see you next time.
Bye.